Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so now we are continuing with the book reading on Venerable Ānanda's section. So last week we read how Venerable Ānanda first made the wish to become a personal assistant of a future Buddha many aeons ago. Under that time, it was the Buddha Padumuttara. And in many lifetimes, Venerable Ānanda and the Bodhisatta, Buddha Gautama, before he became enlightened, crossed paths, and they had very close connection in many lives. Sometimes as a family member, sometimes as a friend, sometimes as a king and another person very close to the king, things like that. So there were many. They came across each other in many lifetimes, and that's why also it became the condition for them to also have that close connection in their final lives. Yeah. Okay. So this today we read about Venerable Ānanda's side perspective during the final days of the Buddha Gautama. Okay, excuse me. So the single most important sutta highlighting Ānanda's relationship to the Buddha is the Mahaparinibbana Sutta from the Digha Nikaya number 16, which is a chronicle of the Buddha's last days, yeah, and ultimate entrance into Parinibbana, final passing away. And these records convey a special mood, the mood of parting, of separation, which was especially painful for Ānanda. And it is also the first small beginning of the decline of the Dhamma, which will gradually disappear with increased distance from the Buddha Gautama's lifetime until a new Buddha arises. So this entire text gives, as it were, voice to the admonition to practice the Dhamma while there is still a chance. And it reflects once more Ānanda's whole character, and therefore we will follow its course, emphasizing those passages in which the spotlight falls on Ānanda. So the first section of this sutta, Mahaparinibbana Sutta, starts at Rajagaha, or present-day Rajagaha, which is the capital of the state of the kingdom of Magadha. Okay. So at that time, Devadatta's attempt to create a schism in the Sangha, schism means a split in the Sangha, had failed 7 years earlier. And King Ajatasattu still reigned in Magadha. So King Ajatasattu was the son of King Bimbisara, who, at one time, King Ajatasattu, Prince Ajatasattu, was influenced by Devadatta. And he kind of overthrew his father, the king, Bimbisara, and took over the throne. And threw his father, King Bimbisara, into prison. After that, of course, after King Ajatasattu became king, then he repented and, also followed the Buddha's teaching as a disciple, but he had to go through that, yeah. And it was said that King Bimbisara, from his prison cell, he could see the view of the Buddha and the monks coming down from the mountain or hill where they lived up in the caves. There, coming down for alms round, and that sight alone was enough to make King Bimbisara really happy, even though he was being imprisoned. Yeah, that was how the story goes. So at this time, towards the final days of the Buddha, Gautama, King Ajatasattu was still king in Magadha. King Pasenadi of Kosala is another kingdom, and King Pasenadi was a strong supporter of the Buddha Gautama. And King Pasenadi of Kosala had just been overthrown, and the Sakyan clan had come to its tragic end, in which many of Ānanda's close relatives were killed. These different kingdoms, they constantly war with each other. And the Sakyan clan is a warrior clan, a warrior caste. So unfortunately, many of them were killed during the wars. At that time, 3 famous warrior clans lived north of the river Ganges near the Himalayas. They were the Kolias, the Malas, and the Vajans, and all of whom had retained relative independence from King Ajatasattu. So they break away and form their own kingdoms. So King Ajatasattu, he had the intention of destroying the Vajans and incorporating their land into his growing empire. So he wanted to become stronger, take over the Vajans' land. Well, the Buddha could not prevent the ruin of those Sakyans who had not entered the order. So at the time when Buddha, started propagating, and then the Sangha grew bigger, a lot of his family members became ordained. A lot of the Sakyan royals, men, women, became ordained, but not all. Not all. So some of them were killed when these wars happened, yeah? And the Buddha couldn't do anything to prevent that, as they had to pay a karmic debt. But he did help the Vajans and later indirectly also the Malas. And this is the external political background of the last years of the Buddha's life. In detail, this incident happened as follows. So King Ajatasattu gave orders to his minister, Vasakara, to go to the Buddha and announce his intention to enter into battle against the Vajans. Now, while Vasakara delivered his message, the Venerable Ānanda was standing behind the Buddha, fanning him. So then the Enlightened One turned to Ānanda and put 7 questions to him about the lifestyle and conditions of the Vajans. And in reply to these questions, Ānanda declared that the Vajans often had council meetings and deliberated harmoniously. They did not repeal their old laws. They followed the advice of the elders. They did not rape women, so they were respectful. They honored their temples and shrines. They did not revoke gifts to religious places. So if people gave them gifts for their temples and shrines, they won't reject it. And gave protection and hospitality to all true priests and ascetics. And with these 7 qualities, said the Buddha, one could expect prosperity for the Vajans, not decline. And sometime earlier, the Buddha had given them these 7 rules. So turns out, before the Vajans came to the Buddha to seek advice, how can their kingdom prosper for long? And so the Buddha gave them these 7 advice. You follow this, you can expect your kingdom to prosper. So the king's minister replied that even one of these qualities would be enough to ensure their continued existence as a clan. As long as the Vajans kept to these 7 rules, it would be impossible for the king to conquer them, except through inner dissension or treachery. So what the Buddha is saying is, if you all keep these 7 rules, your kingdom will flourish. No one can conquer you unless there is inner dissension. So it's like some disharmony, some tension, internal political tension, let's say, or treachery, someone betrayed. Yeah, usually, and when 2 kingdoms are at war, if they're both strong kingdoms, then usually one of the main cause is betrayal, treachery. So someone within, betrayed their own country. Okay. So this minister Vasakara left with this conviction in mind and reported to King Ajatasattu that it would be useless to start a war against the Vajans. And the Indian people in those days had so much confidence in the spiritual strength of a people that the hint of moral superiority was sufficient to prevent a war. So that much of confidence in moral, spiritual strength. Yeah. Only much later, after the demise of the Buddha, was it possible for the king to overrun the Vajans, and it was only because they had, meanwhile, forsaken their moral integrity. So they probably didn't keep to those 7 rules that the Buddha gave them. So this highly political discussion was used by the Buddha as an occasion to request Ānanda to call all the monks of the area together. He would give them an exhortation about 7 things that would enable the Sangha to flourish. So the bhikkhus should assemble frequently. They should come together, come together frequently, like, every full moon, new moon, come together, should conduct their affairs amicably. So, maybe have rules in the monastery, like, who should do what. Usually responsibilities are distributed fairly. Everyone should be happy doing them mindfully together, things like that, amicably, living well together. They should not make new rules, but obey the old ones. So whatever rules are already there, they shouldn't change them or make new ones. Just follow the old ones. They should honor the elders of the Sangha and give heed to their advice. So the older members of the Sangha, they should honor them. They should follow their advice. They should resist craving, enjoy solitude, and practice mindfulness at all times, so that like-minded persons would be attracted, and those who are already living the holy life would be happy. So this was the advice that the Buddha gave for the monks and nuns, Sangha members. So after the Buddha had addressed the monks in this way, he gave them the following terse summary of the teaching, which recurs many times throughout this narrative. Such is virtue, such is concentration, such is wisdom. Sila, samadhi, panya. So concentration, samadhi, or collectedness, fortified with virtue. So the collectedness fortified, strengthened with virtue, with the sila, brings great benefits and great fruits. Wisdom, the panya, fortified with the collectedness, strengthened with the collectedness or together with the collectedness, brings great benefits and great fruits. The mind fortified with wisdom is liberated from all cankers, hindrances, anything that does, blocks us from our progress in the path. So the mind fortified with wisdom is liberated from all the cankers, namely from the canker of sensual desire, the canker of the desire for becoming, and the canker of ignorance. Yeah. So after this exhortation, the Buddha commenced his last journey. He always went to places where there were people ready to understand the Dhamma, or where misunderstandings needed to be sorted out, or where brute force could be prevented. And on this last journey, he went first in the direction of the Ganges River towards Nalanda, which later became the famous Nalanda University, famous Buddhist educational center. Huge university, yeah. And this town was near Sariputta's birthplace. And here Sariputta took leave of the Buddha. He wanted to stay behind and teach the Dhamma to his mother before he attained final Nibbana. We read about, yeah, Venerable Sariputta's story before he passed away. Yeah? And also Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana were much older than the Buddha Gautama. And when saying farewell, this great disciple Sariputta voiced once more the Buddha's praise. It is clear to me, Lord, that there is no one more distinguished in wisdom than yourself. Then the awakened one went with a large company of monks to Vesali, or Vaishali. And this town was the capital of the Vajrayans, whose virtue he had praised, and from whom he had averted the threat of King Ajatasattu's attack. And at Vaishali he fell ill with a deadly disease, which he suppressed by sheer willpower, as he did not want to die without having assembled the disciples once more. That a Buddha can become ill is due to the imperfection of the body, but that he can master the illness at will is due to his spiritual perfection. So Ānanda had been despondent over the Buddha's illness, so dejected that he could not think properly. And he told the Buddha that he had found consolation in the fact that surely the awakened one would not attain final Nibbana without having given some regulations about the order to the monks. So Ānanda was kind of saying to the Buddha, I don't think you're going to pass away just like that without leaving us some kind of regulation, some kind of rules, some kind of manner of conduct we must follow after you pass away. But the Buddha rejected this. What more does the Sangha expect from me, Ānanda? I have taught the Dhamma without making any distinction of esoteric and exoteric doctrine. There's nothing that the Tathagata holds back with the closed fist of a teacher. So what the Buddha is trying to say is, for 45 years, I've taught everything that needs to be taught to the Sangha. What more do I need to tell? I don't hold back anything. There's nothing that I should teach that I haven't taught already, is what the Buddha said. Whoever thinks that it is he who should lead the Sangha of bhikkhus, or that the Sangha of bhikkhus depends on him, such a one would have to give last instructions. But the Tathagata has no such idea. So what instructions should he have to give to the Sangha of bhikkhus? So here it is an interesting conversation that the Buddha had with Ānanda. Ānanda is saying, oh, you are our teacher, you lead us, so please leave us some instructions before you pass away. But the Buddha is saying, only someone who leads the Sangha or think that, the Sangha of monks and nuns depend on this teacher. That means without this teacher, they will be in difficulty. That, such a person thinks like that, such a person would give last instructions. But the Buddha is saying, but the Tathagata doesn't think like that. Doesn't think that the Buddha doesn't have the notion of, the bhikkhus depend on him. So it's kind of aligns with the rest of the suttas. A lot of time the Buddha said, the Dhamma is your teacher, the Dhamma is your guide. You are your there's one that says we are kind of like we are our own island. We practice, if we practice according to the Dhamma, that is the one that guides us. So we don't have to depend on, we don't have to depend on the Buddha. So when we say we go to the refuge, we go to the Buddha for refuge, we go to the Dhamma for refuge, we go to the Sangha for refuge. It's not we depend on, as in going for refuge is different. Going for refuge means we understand and take the teachings of the Buddha. We practice according to the teachings of the Buddha, and we develop our faith and confidence and progress that way. But not in the sense that, I depend on that to become happy. I mean, how should I say? It's the understanding. It's the understanding of what the meaning of taking refuge in the Triple Gem is. It's not so much, the English language is a little bit tricky, isn't it? But language is tricky anyway in general, not just English. It is the understanding of when we take refuge, we are taking refuge in, let's put it this way. We do the practice through investigation, through experimentation to a certain extent. And then from there, we then come through some realization, some insight. Yeah, that's what TWIM is all about, coming into some insights. And then from there, we further develop our confidence, and it's like a feedback loop mechanism, and then we progress further. So it's not like someone bestowing something onto us and then we are, going to that person, waiting for them to bestow, like telling us, going, yes, you are on the right path. No, you are not on the right path. So not in that sense of dependency. Yeah. And this has always been how the Buddha taught, that the Buddha always said, use, your Dhamma. The Dhamma is your refuge. Use the Dhamma, use your wisdom. Yeah. Even Bhante Vimalaramsi, when every time he taught, he always reminded us. He always said, I'm not your teacher, I'm just a guide. I just point. You all are your own teacher. You are your own. You are your own teacher. You decide, you discover, and then you realize insights, and then you progress. Is what Bhante Vimalaramsi used to say as well. Okay, so the Buddha continued, now I am almost 80, Ānanda. I have come to the end of my life. I can maintain the body only with difficulty, just as one maintains a dilapidated old cart. My body is at ease only when I enter upon and dwell in the signless deliverance of the mind. But the master immediately gave Ānanda an antidote for the sadness caused by these words. So, Ānanda, each of you should be an island unto yourself. Dwell with yourself as a refuge and with no other as your refuge. Each of you should make the Dhamma your island. Dwell with the Dhamma as your refuge and with no other as your refuge. So this has always been repeated various parts of the sutta. So the third section of the sutta is located at Vaishali, where the Buddha stayed for the rains retreat. And one day after the rains, he requested Ānanda to take a sitting mat and accompany him to the Cāpāla Shrine in order to pass the day there in meditation. And when they were seated, the Blessed One looked at the peaceful landscape before him and reminded Ānanda of the many beautiful spots in the vicinity. And the reason for this seemingly unmotivated description of the countryside becomes clear later. The Buddha then said, anyone who has developed the 4 roads to psychic power, made them his vehicle and his foundation, could, if he wished, live out the aeon, the kappa, or the remainder of the aeon. The Tathagata has done all that, and he could, if requested, live to the end of this aeon. So here the Buddha was kind of giving hints, like anyone who developed that ability, fully mastered the 4 roads to psychic powers, made them his foundation. If somebody asks, yes, they can live out the full kappa, they can extend their life. Was hinting, yeah. But although Ānanda was given such a plain and broad hint, which certainly coincided with his own longing, he did not beg the Buddha to stay alive out of compassion for all beings. Not only once, but second, third time, the Buddha addressed Ānanda in the same way. So in terms of the Buddhist tradition, usually when we ask question even, yeah, the tradition is we can ask the same thing 3 times. So here the Buddha is hinting the same thing 3 times. After the 3rd time, no more. Okay. So in Buddhist tradition, I remembered many years ago, I can't remember where I picked this up from or which teacher, but we were kind of, it was kind of mentioned in Buddhist tradition 3 times. So if we want to ask a question, let's say to a particular teacher, so the first time we asked the question, and if we didn't get an answer, we could ask the second time. But if we 3 times ask the same question, we still don't get an answer, then we better don't ask anymore. Okay, so 3 times maximum. All right. So each time Ānanda failed to catch the hint, in his confusion, his mind had been ensnared by Mara, the evil one, who still had some degree of power over him. So whatever was the mental state of Ānanda, nobody knows. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Okay. At this moment, Ānanda, who usually was so circumspect, had lost his mindfulness, which previously had happened only in negligible matters. Otherwise, our whole aeon could have taken quite a different turn. Could it be that at just that moment, Ānanda was so absorbed in the pleasure of being in close companionship with the Buddha that the master's hint failed to register on his mind? Was it perhaps just his very attachment to the Buddha's company, reinforced by the enchanting evening hour and the peaceful forest, that prevented him from responding in a way proper to such deep attachment, a response that would have accorded with his deepest wishes for a longer life for the Blessed One? If Mara had not intervened, Ānanda would have asked the Buddha to accept the burden of a prolonged life, and the Buddha would have consented out of compassion for the world. But Mara, afraid that innumerable beings would have thereby escaped his clutch, hastened to prevent this, and the course of history was sealed. This scene, so poignant and suggestive, belongs to the mysteries of the Pali Canon, and one could puzzle about it endlessly. Indeed. So we could probably guess and, debate about that forever and wouldn't have come to any conclusion. So let's not do that. Okay. But let us continue the account. So the Buddha dismissed Ānanda, who seated himself under a nearby tree and started meditating. Then Mara appeared before the Buddha and reminded him of a promise made 45 years before, immediately after his enlightenment. Mara had then requested the Buddha to enter final Nibbana and not to teach. But the Buddha had replied that he would not die until he had thoroughly trained and instructed the monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, and the holy life was well established. Now, however, all that had been accomplished, and Mara had come to remind him that it was time to fulfill his promise. Then the Buddha replied, "Do not trouble yourself, evil one. Before long, the parinibbana of the Tathagata will come about. 3 months from now, the Tathagata will pass utterly away." So the Buddha actually can predict when he will pass. Then the Blessed One, with mindfulness and clear comprehension, relinquished his will to live on. And just as he did so, the earth quaked and trembled, and the thunder resounded in the heavens. Such was the powerful effect on the natural elements when he renounced them as a basis for life. And when Ānanda became aware of the earthquake and thunder, he asked the Buddha for their cause. And the Buddha replied that there were 8 reasons for earthquakes. The first is an occasion when great forces move. Great forces move, obviously we know, from science, geography. So you got the plates in the earth, bottom of the sea, ocean. When they move even a little bit, that force is great enough to cause an earthquake. Sorry, not only in the sea, also land. Yeah, anywhere where there are plates and they move a little bit, and there's always movement on earth. Yeah, so even a little bit, that vibration is enough to cause an earthquake. The second is when a monk or Brahmin possessing supernormal powers reaches a certain kind of meditation. The last 6 are at the conception, birth, enlightenment, the first teaching of the Dhamma, the relinquishing of the will to live, and the final Nibbana of a Buddha. And one can see from this how deep is the connection between a Buddha, the highest of all beings, and the whole cosmos. Yeah. So the expositions that follow on the 8 kinds of assemblies, the 8 fields of mastery, and the 8 liberations seem to be a digression. Okay, this is a commentary, yeah? It appears to be one of those occasions for spontaneously arisen discourse. Scholars speak about insertions into the text because at first there were 8 reasons for earthquakes, then 3 other 8s were brought in. In reality, there is a deeper connection designed to bring Ānanda from the superficial to the profound and to let him know the quickly approaching death of the Buddha in such a way that it would not disturb him. So after the Buddha had helped to direct Ānanda on the path towards enlightenment, he related how he had told Mara 45 years ago that he would not attain final Nibbana until the Dhamma was well established. Now Mara had appeared before him, and he told Mara that he would live for only another 3 months. Therefore, he had now relinquished the will to live, and that has been the reason for the earthquake. So the Buddha was trying to explain to Ānanda why there was an earthquake. Now, without a moment's hesitation, Ānanda begged the awakened one 3 times to remain for the whole aeon. But the Buddha replied that the appropriate time for this had lapsed. Already the Buddha asked before, and Ānanda didn't answer, so that's it. Buddha already relinquished. So when Ānanda asked for the third time, the Buddha inquired, "Do you have faith, Ānanda, in the enlightenment of the Tathagata?" When Ānanda affirmed this, he asked, "Why then, Ānanda, do you persist against the Tathagata up to the third time?" So this is interesting, again, in the Buddhist tradition, when we ask question, we ask once, don't get favorable answer, we ask twice again. If we ask the third time, it's almost like borderline, we are testing the teacher, So that is what the Buddha is saying. You don't have faith in the Tathagata, that's why you have to keep asking until the third time. Then the Buddha made it clear to Ānanda that he had let the opportunity slip by. The fault is yours, Ānanda. Here you have failed, inasmuch as you were unable to grasp the plain suggestion given by the Tathagata, and you did not ask him to remain. For if you had done so, Ānanda, twice the Tathagata might have declined, but the third time he would have consented. He also reminded Ānanda that not only now, but already 15 times previously, he had told him that he could remain for a whole aeon, but each time Ānanda had remained silent. Finally, the Buddha added his admonition on impermanence. Have I not taught from the very beginning that with all that is dear and beloved, there must be change, separation, and severance? Of that which is arisen, come into being, condition, and subject to decay, one cannot bring it about that it will not come to dissolution. Further, it is impossible for a Tathagata to go back on his word. In 3 months' time, he shall attain final Nibbana. So thereupon he requested Ānanda to assemble the monks of the area. He addressed the assembly with the exhortation to learn and practice the path to enlightenment, which he had so clearly taught throughout his ministry, so that this holy life may endure long for the welfare and happiness of many, out of compassion for the world, for the good, welfare, and happiness of devas and humans. And at the end of the discourse, he announced that 3 months from now, the Tathagata's parinibbana will take place. And he gave the monks some stanzas for contemplation. My years are now full ripe. The lifespan left is short. Departing, I shall leave you, relying on myself alone. Be earnest then, monks, mindful, pure in virtue, with firm resolve, guard your own mind. One who in this Dhamma and discipline dwells in constant heedfulness shall abandon the wandering on in birth and make an end to suffering. Excuse me. The fourth section of the sutta tells of the Buddha resuming his journey after the rains retreat and declaring that he will not return to Vishali. And on the way, he spoke to the monks on the same topics he had expounded earlier. He declared that they had to travel through this long round of rebirths because they had not penetrated 4 things: a noble one's virtue, a noble one's concentration or collectedness, a noble one's wisdom, and a noble one's deliverance. And again, as so often on this last journey, he emphasized concentration or collectedness fortified by virtue, so samadhi, fortified by the sīla, and wisdom, panya, fortified by the samadhi. At the next resting place, he explained to the monks how they should act if someone purported to quote his words. One should remember these sentences and look for verification in the Vinaya or confirmation in the suttas. So here the Buddha reminded as kind of parting words to his monks. Anytime somebody says they are the whatever, this is true, blah, 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 we should look for verification. We should look for confirmation in the sutta, in the Vinaya. Go back to the text. And if one could not find them there, then one would have come to conclusion that it had been wrongly learned by that person. One should reject it. So this admonition was extremely important for the faithful transmission of his words and has been the reason why, even to this day, one can distinguish between the Buddha's own words and post-canonical or inauthentic texts. So it's again a reminder that, we don't just read blindly and just follow blindly. We need to check. And even if we check with the text, even after that, we should check with our own understanding. We should check with our own practice. Again and again, we should check. So after this, the Buddha journeyed to the province of the Malas, the warrior clan nearest to the Himalayas. It is possible that in the meantime, he had also been to Savatthi, because it was there that the news of Sariputta's death reached him. In the land of the Malas, the neighbors of the Sakyans, the goldsmith Cunda invited him and the monks for a meal. The chief food item was a dish called Sukara Madhava. So the Buddha asked the goldsmith to serve this dish only to him and to offer the other items to the monks. Then he asked that the remainder of that food be buried, for I do not see in all this world anyone who could eat it and entirely digest it, except the Tathagata. So a very interesting message the Buddha told to the goldsmith, yeah? After the meal, the Buddha became ill with a severe attack of dysentery, but he bore this illness with equanimity and was not deterred from continuing on his journey. Along the way, he told Ānanda to spread his robe as he was exhausted, wished to rest. He then asked Ānanda to bring him some water from the nearby stream, but Ānanda said he would prefer to bring water from the river because the stream had been churned up by many carts. After the Buddha had repeated his request 3 times, however, the obedient Ānanda went to the stream and saw that in the meantime, through a miracle, the water had become clear. And on the way, the Buddha met Pukusa, a Mala, who was a disciple of Alara Kalama. So remember Alara Kalama? He was one of the previous teachers of the Buddha Gautama before the Buddha gained enlightenment. Yeah. So the Buddha won Pukusa's confidence with an account of his own meditative powers, and Pukusa took refuge and became a lay disciple, the last one in the Buddha's lifetime. Then he presented 2 sets of golden-hued robes to the Buddha. The Buddha told him to give one to himself and the other to Ānanda. And on this occasion, Ānanda did not reject the gift. So remember when we first discussed the first few chapters of Venerable Ānanda's story, when Ānanda became the personal attendant to the Buddha, he laid down a couple of rules, and one of them was, if anyone gives the Buddha a gift, that gift should not be given to Ānanda as well. But in this occasion, Ānanda didn't reject it. Yeah. And he remarked that the golden hue of the robe appeared almost dull compared to the bright radiance of the Buddha's skin. The Blessed One then said that there are two occasions when the complexion of the Tathagata becomes exceptionally clear and bright: on the day of his enlightenment and on the day of his final Nibbana. In the last hours of the following night, he would attain final Nibbana. After bathing, the Buddha told Ānanda that no one should reproach the goldsmith Cunda because the Buddha had died after taking a meal from him. There were two offerings in the world that were best: the alms food after which the Bodhisattva becomes enlightened, and the alms food after which the Buddha attains final Nibbana. Cunda would gain much merit from his gift: long life, good health, much influence, fame, and a heavenly rebirth. And the fifth chapter of the sutta starts with the Buddha's request to Ānanda to accompany him to the region of Kusinārā, to the sāla tree grove of the Malas. And when they arrived, Ānanda arranged a couch for him with the head to the north between two large sāla trees. And although it was not the right season, the trees flowered and sprinkled their blossoms over the body of the Blessed One. And blossoms of the heavenly coral tree fell from the sky together with the heavenly scents. And there was music of the spheres, heavenly music. Then the awakened one then said, "It is not thus, Ānanda, that the Tathagata is venerated and honored in the highest degree. But whatever bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, layman or laywoman, abides by the Dhamma, lives uprightly by the Dhamma, walks in the way of the Dhamma, it is such a one that venerates and honors the Tathagata in the highest degree." So what the Buddha is trying to say is, even all these flowers sprinkle and there's heavenly scents and music, etc., that's not really the way to honor the Buddha to the highest level. The way to honor the Buddha to the highest level is to live and practice according to the Dhamma. It's very clear the Buddha said this, yeah? And just then, Venerable Upavana was fanning the Blessed One. And when the Buddha requested Upavana to stand aside, Ānanda wanted to know why he was so summarily dismissed. Then the Buddha explained, sorry, 1 second, yeah? And the Buddha explained that innumerable deities had come from all directions of the world to have a last glance at a fully enlightened one, who so seldom can be seen. But since Upavana, an eminent monk, was standing in front of him, they could not see him. And Upavana's spiritual radiance must have been more powerful than the penetrative ability of the gods. Okay. The Ānanda inquired further into details about the gods and learned that those who were not free from passion were weeping and wailing, but those who were free from passion were resigned and calm. The Buddha gave Ānanda another directive. There are 4 places in the world worthy of veneration, which would inspire a faithful follower: birthplace of the Buddha, which is Lumbini; place of the Buddha's enlightenment, which is Buddha Gaya; place where the Buddha taught the Dhamma for the first time, which is Sarnath; and the place of his Parinibbana, Kusinārā. Anyone who passes away with confident heart while on pilgrimage to these shrines will attain a heavenly rebirth. Seemingly out of context, Ānanda asked a question already narrated: how one should act towards women. And then he asked how to deal with the body of Blessed One. Sharp, came the reply. Do not hinder yourself, Ānanda, in honoring the body of the Tathagata. Rather, you should strive for your own good. There are wise householders who will render honor to the body of the Tathagata. So the Buddha is saying, don't waste your mindfulness, don't waste your efforts to go and think about how to honor this body after the Tathagata's parinibbana. Don't worry about that, the Buddha is saying. You should focus on your own practice. This sort of thing, householders will, that means some lay people, they will take care of it. Then Ānanda wanted to know how the lay people should carry out the funeral ceremony. So the Buddha gave these detailed instructions about the cremation and the erection of a stupa. There were 4 beings worthy of a stupa: a supreme Buddha, a Pacceka Buddha, an Arhat disciple, and a world monarch. And one who worships there would also attain much merit. And then Ānanda, overpowered by grief, went inside, clasped the door jamb, and wept. He knew he still had to fight and conquer, and the master who had so much compassion for him would soon be no more. What remained as the fruit of his 25 years of service? This famous scene is often depicted in Buddhist art and is reminiscent of the weeping Christians beneath the cross. When the Buddha did not see Ānanda and inquired where he was, he had summoned him and said to him, "Do not sorrow, Ānanda. Have I not told you many times that everything changes and vanishes? How could something that has come into being not be destroyed? For a long time, Ānanda, you have attended on the Tathagata, gladly, sensitively, sincerely, without reserve, with deeds, speech, and thoughts of loving kindness. You have made great merit, Ānanda. Keep on striving, and soon you will be free from all cankers." And he then told of an incident long ago in a past life in which Ānanda had served him and made much worldly merit. So after the awakened one had foretold a second time that Ānanda would soon attain arhatship, he returned to the monks and once more proclaimed praise of Ānanda. All the Buddhas of the past have had such excellent attendance, and all Buddhas of the future will have them too. His skill in dealing with people is admirable. If a company of bhikkhus goes to see Ānanda, they become joyful on seeing him. If he speaks to them on the Dhamma, they are made joyful by his discourse. And when he becomes silent, they are disappointed. And so it is also with the bhikkhunis, the laymen, and the laywomen. Each assembly taught by Ānanda is always overjoyed, and everyone wants to listen to him further. Ānanda has such remarkable, extraordinary popularity as one otherwise finds only in a world monarch. And here too, as so often in the text, we can find the 2 complementary ways that the Buddha addressed Ānanda. On the one hand, great praise for him and a summons to the monk to appreciate his greatness. On the other, always a reminder to overcome the last defilements. And after this praise, Ānanda turned the conversation to another topic. He suggested that it might be better if the Buddha did not die here in the backwoods, in the forest, yeah? But in one of the great capitals, like in the city, such as Savatthi, Rajgarh, Kausambi, or Benares. It is noteworthy that he did not propose the Buddha's hometown of Kapilavatthu, which had just recently been ransacked, almost destroyed by the son of King Pasenadi. So Ānanda did not mention it, just as he did not mention Vesali because the Buddha had said that he would not return there. Ānanda thought that the funeral ceremony could be performed better in one of the large cities by the lay followers living there. But the Buddha, lying on his deathbed, explained to him in great detail why Kusinārā was not an unimportant place at all. The Buddha had lived there a long time ago as the world monarch, Mahasudarsana, and he had left his body there no fewer than 6 times. As a world monarch, this was the 7th and last time. The splendor and magnificence of that kingdom had been destroyed, had disappeared, had vanished. And this indeed was enough to make one wary of all conditioned things. So the Buddha is saying Kusinārā is very important, even though it's not a large city today, but I have died here many times previously. So that's the significance. So the Buddha's discourse about Mahasudarsana was the last great teaching he gave. Subsequently, he let Ānanda summon the malas of Kusinārā so that they could bid farewell to him. And that time, a wanderer named Subhada was in Kusinārā and heard about the forthcoming parinibbana of the Buddha. And reflecting how rare it was for a Buddha to appear in the world, he wished to have a doubt resolved by him before it was too late. He begged Ānanda to let him approach the Buddha, but Ānanda refused, saying that the master should not be troubled on his deathbed. And Ānanda refused permission 3 times out of love for the Buddha. But the Buddha, who overheard the conversation, told Ānanda to let the wanderer approach. He wants to inquire about the Dhamma for the sake of knowledge and not to cause trouble. So then Subhada then posed a question. All the present-day teachers claim to be enlightened, yet their teachings contradict one another. Which ones are truly enlightened? The Buddha dismissed the question and said, wherever one finds the Noble Eightfold Path, there one can find the true holy life. And there the 4 fruits of the homeless life can be found. If monks live in the right way, then the world will never be devoid of arhats, of true saints. Over 50 years I have been a monk. I have expounded the Dhamma. And apart from adherence to the Dhamma, there can be no holy life. And this short discourse was sufficient for Subhada to realize the Dhamma in its manifold aspects and to go for refuge to the Buddha. And when Subhada asked for admission into the order, the Buddha told him about the rule according to which wanderers of other sects had to live on probation for 4 months. And Subhada agreed readily, even if he had to wait on probation for 4 years. And thereupon, the Buddha accepted him immediately, making a last exception. And within minutes, this very last monk, disciple of the Buddha, became an arhat. And the 6th section of the sutta begins with the last instructions of the Buddha. First, he advised the monks never to think after his death that they no longer have a teacher. For the Dhamma and Vinaya will be your teacher after I am gone. And even to this day, the word of the Buddha laid down in the text is decisive for his followers. Second, after his death, the monks should no longer address each other indiscriminately as friend. The senior monks could address the junior ones as friend or by their names, while the junior ones should use Venerable Sir Bhante when they are addressing the senior monks. And this rule affirmed reverence according to the seniority in the order, independent of personal qualities that monks or nuns may have. The third rule gave the monks permission to abolish the lesser and minor rules and all they entailed, according to their own judgment. And the 4th and last instruction was to impose the higher penalty on the monk, Channa. And Ānanda asked how that was to be understood, and the Buddha explained that Channa was not to be spoken to or advised or instructed unless he repented. So Channa must have broken some rules, I'm assuming. And after these primarily external directions which Ānanda was to fulfill, the Buddha once more turned to the whole assembly of monks and asked them whether they had any doubt or problem concerning the enlightened one, the content and meaning of the Dhamma, the order of the monks, the Sangha, and above all, about the path or way of practice. And they should express their doubts so that they will not regret it later when the voice of the teacher had been silenced. But upon being asked 3 times, the group did not respond. And thereupon Ānanda said it was amazing that not even one monk had any doubts. And the Buddha corrected him once again, because Ānanda could not know for sure that really no one had any doubts. And it was possible that a monk did not want to voice his doubt, or that he was not conscious of it in this last hour. Only with such total knowledge could one speak in this manner. But in reality, it was exactly as Ānanda had said. The Buddha showed in this way the difference between Ānanda's confidence and his own, the perfect one's insight. The least of the 500 monks present was a stream enterer, because the absence of doubt is one of the signs of this attainment. And once more the master turned to the assembly of monks to give them his final words of farewell. Now, monks, I declare this to you. It is the nature of all conditioned things to vanish. Strive for the goal with diligence. So this particular sentence is very famous. It's translated in different ways, yeah, but sometimes it's translated as all conditioned things are impermanent, strive on with diligence, something like that, okay? But it's famous. Excuse me. And after the Exalted One had spoken these last words, he entered into the 4 jhanas and the formless spheres of meditative absorption until he attained the stage of cessation of perception and feeling. And while the master was in cessation, Ānanda said to Anuruddha, Blessed One has attained final Nibbana, Venerable Sir. He no longer addressed him as friend, but as a senior monk, although both had been ordained on the same day. Anuruddha, however, had the divine eye and corrected him. The Buddha is in a state of cessation, but had not yet passed away. To recognize this last subtle difference of a state of mind was only possible for an arhat like Anuruddha, who was skilled in clairvoyance. Subsequently, the Buddha entered the 9 stages of concentration in reverse order, back to the first jhana. Then he rose again through the 4 jhanas, and during his absorption in the 4th jhana, he passed away. And at the moment his life ended, the earth quaked and thunder roared, just as he had predicted. And the Brahma Sahampati, who had induced the Buddha to teach, and who himself was a non-returner, spoke a stanza which pointed to the impermanence of even a Buddha's body. And the king of the Devas, Sakka, a stream enterer, spoke a stanza which repeated the famous lines that the Buddha had proclaimed during his own discourse. Conditions truly are transient. And Anuruddha gave voice to 2 serene verses, but Ānanda lamented. Then there was terror, and the hair stood up when he, the all-accomplished one, the Buddha, passed away. And all those of the 500 monks who had not yet attained full liberation from passion lamented like Ānanda. The Venerable Anuruddha, however, consoled them all. He pointed to the immutable law of impermanence and turned their attention to the presence of invisible deities, amongst whom there were also those who lamented and those who were free of passions. Anuruddha passed the rest of the night talking to Ānanda about the Dhamma. In the 43 years of their lives as homeless ones, not a single conversation about the Dhamma seems to have taken place between these 2 very dissimilar siblings. But now Anuruddha devoted himself to his younger half-brother, who naturally assumed the role of director among the close disciples, asked Ānanda to inform the Malas of the Buddha's final Nibbana. So when Ānanda delivered this message, the Malas gathered all the requisites for a great funeral ceremony, such as flowers and incense, and went in a procession to the Sāla tree grove. And there they paid homage to the body of the Buddha with a festive dance, singing, music, banners and flags and flowers and incense. until the seventh day. And one may wonder why they thought of festivities at such a time. But why should they grieve? That would have changed nothing. With their dancing and singing, they showed respect and veneration for the Master. They exalted that a Buddha had appeared in the world, that they had heard his Dhamma, that he had wandered through India for such a long time, teaching the multitudes, and that he had founded the Sangha to preserve the Dhamma. And on the seventh day, they erected a pyre for the cremation. And when the monks wanted to light the funeral pyre, they were unable to do so. And Anuruddha explained that the deities were preventing them because they wanted to wait for the arrival of Venerable Mahakassapa, who had not been present during the Buddha's last days and was now on his way to Kusinārā with a group of monks. So we read about this when we were reading the chapters on Venerable Mahakassapa. And when Kassapa finally arrived together with his company of monks, he circumambulated the corpse 3 times as a last mark of respect toward the Blessed One. Then the funeral pyre ignited by itself, and the coals burned until only the bones remained. No ashes were to be seen. And when the neighboring clans heard the news of the master's death, they all sent messages to ask for relics so that they could erect stupas for them. However, the Malas requested the relics for themselves, for the Buddha had died on their land. And only when a Brahmin urged them not to dispute over the relics of the greatest peacemaker, which is the Buddha, and suggested that they divide everything into 8 parts, did they relent. And so it came about that the bones of the Buddha were divided into 8 parts. And the Brahmin asked for the urn, and another clan received the ashes of the coals. In this way, 10 stupas were erected as memorials. Okay, so that was today's reading, which is a little bit longer, yeah, but yeah, we tried to go through it. It is a little bit of a longer reading today. Sorry, was there any thoughts from anyone who's dialed in? So Pai said, make of this what you will, but I heard that an aeon in the context of the Buddha's lifespan means full lifespan, which at the time would have amounted to 100 years. So quite a different interpretation than what we normally understand as an aeon. Possibly Pai, to be very honest, I don't know. I mean, again, we can debate about this forever. But yeah, it's, I guess, yeah, a matter of thought and you know, perspective and all that. But yeah, again, the fact is that the Buddha passed away at 80 years old. Okay, but already he had left us with a whole bunch of teachings. And as the Buddha asked Ānanda, is there anything that I didn't teach, that I didn't leave behind, you know? So it's kind of like, you know, the Buddha saying, pretty much what I need to do, I have done, pretty much. I've given all these teachings, I have set up the Sangha, laid down the rules of the Vinaya. What more do you want me to do? In a sense. Yeah. But yes, thanks for sharing, Pai. To be honest, who knows really what the Buddha meant, unless we were there. But yeah, but thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts, anyone? It was a little bit of a longer reading. The next reading is after the Buddha's parinibbana, what happened to Ānanda. And then we will read on Anuruddha, who was the Buddha's half-brother. who we could see from today, played a very important role to, in a way, help and console Ānanda when the Buddha passed away. So Venerable Anuruddha, very different character from Ānanda. Didn't seem like they were particularly close, but then again, he did try to help console Venerable Ānanda during the final days of the Buddha. So that was interesting to know. Okay. So if there are no further thoughts or comments, we can share merits. Let me see if I can. Whoops. Okay. Trying to fit into one page. Not very successful, but kind of okay. All right, let us share merits together. May suffering ones be suffering free and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu. Okay. Thank you so much for dialing in. And also for those who will be listening to the recording, I hope this will be useful. All right. And we shall see next week. Not sure yet what the agenda is. We shall see. Okay. Take care. Have a good week ahead. Have a happy, healthy week ahead. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye-bye.